Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. So for today's video, we are going to be replacing the OEM master cylinder off of my ZX-6R and replacing it with the Magura HC1. Now, I've always heard good things about Magura master cylinders, but I've never had the opportunity to try out their performance on track or even on the street for that matter. So we're going to go ahead and get this started. So as you can see, the system is full of brake fluid. So what we're going to do is firstly remove the banjo bolt. It's a double banjo right at the master cylinder, and then we can loosen these bolts and take the OEM master cylinder off the bike. Make sure that you have a rag on the fairings because brake fluid can damage paint very easily. So I'm going to go grab a rag, put it on the fairings. You just want to prevent brake fluid from getting onto any surface, quite honestly, just to be on the safe side. So I did a very quick test fit with the double banjo bolt that I bought. Slightly started to thread it in, and there is absolutely no resistance, and it goes all the way in. I've already done that check. So that's also important before you go and uninstall your master off the bike. Just make sure that all the parts you have for the new master are the right fit. So you'll need a 5mm Allen key and a 14mm wrench. The 5mm Allen key is for these bolts right here to get the master off the clip-on, and the 14mm wrench is for the banjo bolt. A good habit to get into is to always check the level of brake drag that you have before and after you've done a modification to your front braking system. So right now my brake drag is pretty low. I'm very happy with it. I'll do a quick turn of the wheel and then you'll see exactly how much brake drag there is. That's pretty good. So I will also have to remove this bolt where the reservoir is attached to the clip-on. And after loosening this and the two bolts we spoke about on the front that hold the master cylinder to the clip-on tube, the master should come off easily. In my experience, whenever you're working on a bike or on a car, any kind of vehicle, you have to be like 2 steps ahead. So I have this box right here, and that's exactly where I'm going to place the old master once it comes off, because obviously it's still going to be leaking some fluid. So quick summary, these two bolts will come off. The bolt in the back that holds the reservoir to the clip-on will come off, and of course the banjo bolt will come off. Once you have all those bolts off, the master cylinder should just pop out. Obviously the reservoir will still be attached to the master right here. So you'll just take the entire assembly and put it straight into that box. Another thing I wanted to mention is the order in which you loosen the bolts will determine whether this is an easy job or a frustrating job. So if your setup is exactly like mine, I would loosen the banjo bolt first to make sure that the master cylinder is not moving around on the clip-on back and forth and twisting on the clip-on. Then I would move on to these two bolts right there, and then finally this bolt. So this bolt right there happens to be the reservoir mounting point, but it also tightens the clip-ons on the tube. So if you loosen this, the clip-on will slide up and down. Again, this only applies to my setup. Alright, so we have the old master cylinder off the clip-on. Here are the brake lines waiting to receive their new and shiny and German master cylinder. So you'll notice that that nipple that comes off of the master cylinder is pointing towards the throttle cables and the switches on the handlebar. So that's not going to work because the routing for the brake reservoir is going to basically interfere with where those components are right now. So what we're going to have to do is basically rotate that nipple in the master cylinder, that one right there, so that it's pointing towards the front of the bike, and that will give us enough clearance throughout the reservoir and the tie gun tubing that goes around. Alright, so this is the original setup, double banjo at the master cylinder, but obviously, like we mentioned earlier in the video, that this specific bolt will not work with the Magura master cylinder because it's a different thread pitch. An important point here is you'll notice that there's a crush washer between both of the brake lines. You can see right here. So when we're reinstalling when installing the new banjo bolt, we have to make sure that we have a crush washer to separate basically the brake lines from one another. And thankfully, I have one ready to go right here. So you'll see those two drilled holes in the banjo bolt. That means that this is a double banjo bolt intended for two brake lines. We just have to make sure that we've got the crush washers in the correct place. And by correct place, I mean a crush washer between the head of the banjo bolt and the first brake line, then between both brake lines, and then between the second brake line and the master cylinder. So you need 3 crush washers right there. So here's the banjo bolt threaded into the master cylinder with the new copper crush washers. So this is exactly what you should be aiming for. Now we just have to make sure that everything is lined up. So you'll see I'm using a Ladybird reservoir bracket right here for the reservoir. And then we just have to make sure the last step is to just align the tie gun tubing with the master cylinder nipple right here, along with the outlet of the tie gun tubing that's coming out of the reservoir. Alright, so we've got everything tightened up so far. Here we have the banjo bolt threaded into the master cylinder, tightened to spec, and then we have the reservoir attached to the Ladybird bracket. Tie gun tubing is right there. We have a clamp on the end that connects to the reservoir, and then obviously tie gun tubing goes down into the master cylinder nipple right there. Now, one concern I've realized is the travel of the brake lever. As you can see, there is almost no clearance for the lever to travel downwards when you apply the brakes. So I might have to adjust this Woodcraft brake lever guard or get a different design. As you can see, the Woodcraft has a pretty unique point on the clip-on compared to other brake lever guards that usually thread into the tube right here. It is a little further in, so I might have to just ditch this brake lever guard and then have to get one that installs at the very end of the clip-on. Now the next step is going to be filling the reservoir with brake fluid up to the max line, and then we're going to apply the brakes a couple of times to get that fluid down the tubing and into the master cylinder, and then down through the brake lines. There will obviously be a bit of air in the system, so what we're gonna have to do is this right here is the bleeder screw. So we're gonna have to just apply the brakes and crack open the bleeder screw, let as much air as possible out. well, not as possible, but you have to try to get every bit of air in the system out so that you get that nice firm feel on the brake lever. For the next step, we're going to open up the reservoir, fill it up with brake fluid, and then we will start bleeding at the master cylinder bleeder screw. We'll bleed out as much fluid as we can to make sure that we get all the air out of the master cylinder. And then once we're happy with the feel of the lever, we'll move on to the calipers. So as I said before, to bleed the fluid out of the master cylinder, you're gonna access this bleed nipple. This one is a 6mm, the one on the Magura master cylinder. Your master cylinder could be a different size wrench, so make sure you do your research on what size wrench you will need for your own bleed nipple. An excellent tool to have is these flexible plastic pipettes. In case you overfill the reservoir or you need to, add or take away brake fluid. These are an excellent choice. They're also graduated, as you can see. If you're one of those very specific kind of people who likes to know exactly the volume of brake fluid you're adding in your reservoir. So I noticed I added a little too much brake fluid. Once I put the rubber gasket on the top of the brake fluid, I might have a bit of brake fluid overflowing from the reservoir. So I'll just go ahead and squeeze the pipette, put it in, suck some of that out, and that should be perfect. Alright, so you'll notice that there's a bit of an air pocket right here in the Tigan tubing. So I've added the brake fluid, and we should obviously expect that there's a lot of air in the system right now. So the first thing to do to get the air out between the master cylinder and the reservoir is to just use the lever. I'll close in. Now look, as I apply the brakes, look at all that air making its way out. And that's exactly why I left the top of the reservoir off, just to let all that air out of the system. So we'll continue applying the brakes until we don't see any more air bubbles coming out. And then we can move on to the master cylinder nipple, and then we'll move on to the calipers to flush out the old fluid. Alright, so once you think you've gotten all the air out between the master cylinder and the reservoir, newsflash, you haven't. So you'll always find, if you keep a close eye on the Tigan tubing, that there are very, very minuscule air bubbles that are trapped in there. So the best way to get those out is to basically keep the lever depressed for a good 5-6 hours, maybe even overnight, if you can afford the time. So here I have a short bungee cord that I'm going to wrap around the brake lever, which will keep it depressed, and that will slowly allow those minuscule air bubbles to work their way up the master cylinder into the reservoir and out of the system. So I've now got the bungee cord set up, and we'll just leave the lever in this state for the next few hours, and then come back and double check to see if we can see any more air bubbles. The lever feels pretty firm up to this point in the stroke, but then again, you have to factor in that when you're on the track, the system is going to be building up a lot of heat, and those small air bubbles will get bigger and bigger the hotter the system gets, which could end up taking away from that lever feel. Then you'll start getting that spongy feedback from the system. The lever will feel a little spongy, so your brakes will not be operating at their optimal capacity. You're probably wondering, what on earth is that sound?
So no, it's not the bike. It's another device that can really help get all those air bubbles that are trapped in the master cylinder and the system in general right out. So the thing I'm talking about is massage gun. And the way it works is, well, let me just show you. So you apply it to the lever, and then you watch the air bubbles in the tubing. As you can see, that was a ton of air in the system despite the lever being pretty firm. So I think this is definitely one of the best methods of getting that trapped air out of the system. So I'm gonna have to apply it for even longer. As you could see through the tubing that there were a lot of trapped air bubbles in there.
And now we're going to bleed at the master cylinder bleeder nipple. You can see I've set up some Tigan tubing there that runs straight into this cylinder. So we're just gonna crack open this bleeder screw, apply the brake lever, close the bleeder screw, and then let the brake lever go. That way we stop ourselves from sucking air into the master cylinder, and we will be able to expel all the air that's in there, in addition to the older brake fluid as well.
So here's my setup for bleeding of the calipers. I have Tigan tubing off of the bleeder nipple. I've got an 8mm wrench right there on the bleeder screw, and you simply apply the brakes, open up the bleeder screw, close it, then release the brake. And obviously I've been talking about the brake lever here. Alright, so you keep at it until the color of the brake fluid matches the color of the brake fluid from the original container. So as you can see, there's a bit of an orange hue on this brake fluid. This is the old brake fluid. When you look at the brake fluid in the line, it has more of a yellowish tinge, which means that we've expelled all the old brake fluid, and we can move on to the other caliper. And again, the same setup on the other caliper. We've got the Tigan tubing on the nipple, the wrench on the screw. So when I started flushing out the old brake fluid, as you can tell, it has a bit of an orange tinge to it. And now, after bleeding quite a bit, the color of the brake fluid in the line is yellowish, which is the exact same color of the brake fluid from the container that I'm using, which means that all the old brake fluid has been flushed out of this caliper and the line attached to it. So now it's time to jump to the other caliper.
Stay tuned for more tips.